I want to start by acknowledging the people of East Palestine and Ann at the Ohio EPA, who's done a great job on this tragedy, and just say that I think that our leadership, our media, and our politicians were slow to respond to this crisis, in part because a certain segment of our leadership feels like the people of East Palestine are a little out of style. They have the wrong politics, they're a little too rural, maybe a little too white, and I want to thank Senator Capito and Senator Carper, the chairman and ranking member, and all of you for paying attention to this, for caring about this issue, and for showing leadership on it. I think the most important message to the people of East Palestine is that we will not forget about them in the months and years to come, and I think this committee hearing reinforces that message, so it's very personally meaningful for me to be here. I want to also talk about something that hasn't gotten enough attention, but I think is an important part of what's going on the ground right now in East Palestine, which is the cleanup of the toxic chemicals that are in the ground, and they're still in the ground. Now, 2 weeks ago, I would have told you, and I said very publicly, that I was frustrated with Norfolk Southern from Allen Shaw on down for the refusal to dig up the railroad tracks and dig out the toxic chemicals, which is their responsibility to do. I am happy to report that it appears that Norfolk Southern has finally started to do the cleanup in earnest, but now the EPA is making it harder to get the materials out of Ohio in the first place into properly licensed facilities. Right now, as we speak, there are piles of dirt accumulating in East Palestine, piles of dirt filled with toxic chemicals that haven't been moved out of the state in a week. What happens if it rains? What happens if the very toxic dirt that we just dug out of the ground begins to seep back into the ground, causing problems for the air and water for the residents of East Palestine? We need leadership. We need the EPA to get on the ground and aggressively get this stuff out of East Palestine into properly licensed facilities. It's maybe the most important and most pressing thing that's confronting the community of East Palestine today. And again, I thank Ann for her leadership on that particular issue. After the cleanup, we're focused on the cleanup now, justifiably so, but after the cleanup, we need to turn to how to prevent this from happening, or at least how to make it less likely. I'm a realist. I recognize that you're always going to have accidents, but I think that we can make them less likely, and I think importantly, we can give our first responders proper notice when they're responding to these derailments when they happen. It is ridiculous that firefighters and local officials don't know that hazardous chemicals are in their community, coming through their community. In East Palestine, you had a community of largely volunteer firefighters responding to a terrible crisis, toxic burning chemicals without knowing what was on them. It's one of the things that the legislation that Senator Brown, Senator Casey, and Senator Fetterman and I have worked on together, and I thank them for their work on that issue. I want to leave the committee with just a couple of additional thoughts here. I'm a Republican. I'm a pretty conservative Republican, and I worry that there has been a movement in my party and in my movement in response to the legislation that I proposed that would not hold Norfolk Southern or the rail industry accountable. I want to be explicit about that. Now, I'm not talking about returning, and this bill is not returning to the days of rate setting. The 1980s level airline and rail deregulation, I think in a lot of ways was good for consumers and good for the industry, but that doesn't mean we cannot have reasonable public safety enhancements in response to what happened in East Palestine. Now, I've talked to a number of my Republican colleagues, and nearly everybody has dealt in complete good faith, whether they like the bill or have some concerns about it, and these comments are not directed at them. Who they are directed at is a particular slice of people who seem to think that any public safety enhancements for the rail industry is somehow a violation of the free market. Well, if you look at this industry and what's happened in the last 30 years, that argument is a farce. This is an industry that enjoys special subsidies that almost no industry enjoys. This is an industry that enjoys special legal carve-outs that almost no industry enjoys. This is an industry that just 3 months ago had the federal government come in and save them from a labor dispute. It was effectively a bailout, and now they're claiming before the Senate and the House that our reasonable regulation, our reasonable legislation is somehow a violation of the free market. Well, pot, meet the kettle, because that doesn't make an ounce of sense. You cannot claim special government privileges. You cannot ask the government to bail you out and then resist basic public safety. Now, let me just say this. You've heard a lot of talk from my fellow Republicans, and I think that talk is very justified, that we are the party of working people in this country. There's been a big political realignment in this country over the last 30 years, a political realignment that, frankly, I benefited from. We are the party of firefighters, of police officers, of the people who go to work, pay their taxes, fight our country's wars, and keep our communities safe. We are proud of that, and we should be proud of that on the Republican Party. But now we are faced with a choice. With this legislation and how we respond to this crisis, do we do the bidding of a massive industry that is in bed with big government, or do we do the bidding of the people who elected us to the Senate and to the Congress in the first place? I believe that we are the party of working people, but it's time to be the party of working people. We have a choice. Are we for big business and big government, or are we for the people of East Palestine? It's a time for choosing. Let's make the right one.